Elijah has the strength of faith to risk his God being misunderstood. Now, in response to this, Elijah also refrains from defending his God, which is another test of faith. Do you know how deep, how strong the temptation is for us not only to defend ourselves, but to defend our God? When our God is maligned, you can see this happen with a regular basis as you read the news and look at what people write and listen to what people say. Every time some sort of tragedy comes along, what comes along right on the heels is a whole chorus of people saying, oh, God's not evil, God's not bad, God didn't bring this about, God really does love people. It's like clockwork. 9/11, Katrina, the tsunami in Indonesia, the tsunami in Japan, all of those, the same thing. After that happens, there's sort of a chorus of voices that are writing blogs, that are writing articles, that are even writing books and saying, yeah, this was a great tragedy, but God's not bad. God's not a bad God. Why is that? That's because we feel a deep need to defend our God. Why do we feel that need? There's two possible reasons. One is because we are deeply offended when the honor of our God is offended. That is good, that is holy, that is righteous. That is an evidence of a child of God. That when your father is offended, you feel indignation as well. But there's another reason that I think also sometimes comes to play, and that is this. When your God is offended, you're personally offended because you identify with Him. And so when someone criticizes your God or your religion, you take that personally. And you feel the need to vindicate it, not because you're offended that the name of your God was offended, but because you're offended personally. Now, those two motives are drastically different. One is holy, one is unholy. So the next time you find yourself in that position when a friend, an acquaintance, or you read some thing on Facebook in which God is offended and you sort of feel the hair on the back of your neck standing up, ask yourself, why? Why am I so offended? Why do I feel the need to vindicate God? Is it because His honor has been smeared? Or is it because my honor has been smeared? Elijah is in the test. God is testing him. He does not open his mouth to speak vindicative words about his God. He knows that his God will vindicate himself. But in addition to that, I think he's also confused himself. As we began the Elijah story, one of the things we noted was Elijah's knowledge of the Word of God. Remember from Deuteronomy 11, we mentioned it earlier. God says, if you will love me, if you will serve me, if you will not serve the false gods, I will bring water and dew to your land. If you won't, then I'll bring drought. So Elijah knows that passage, and this is what precipitates the whole drought thing, because he knows the Word of God, and he knows that God has declared, if you turn from me to the false gods, I will bring drought. So Elijah knows that passage, which was Deuteronomy chapter 11. Certainly, he also knows passages like Genesis 15. Those who bless you, I will bless. Those who curse you, I will curse. Now, wait a minute. The widow has blessed God's people. She has blessed the man of God. But seemingly, in return for that, God gives her not blessing, but curse. What happened to I'll bless those who bless you? What happened to, we just sang a few minutes ago, Psalm 23. What happened to surely goodness and mercy following me all the days of my life? That was written by David. David lived before Elijah. Elijah probably knows Psalm 23. And what does it mean for goodness and mercy to follow me? At the very minimum, it means that where Elijah goes, goodness and mercy go. So I think Elijah himself, this is a furnace. Elijah himself doesn't quite know what to say. But to his credit, to his great credit, notice what he doesn't say. Thank God he doesn't say, God has a good plan in this. Thank God that he doesn't say, heaven needed another angel. Thank God that he didn't say, God needed your son more than you need him. We trivialize the God of life and death when we make physical death into something as trivial as God needing another angel, as doctrinally unsound as that is. Elijah says the best thing he can say, which is nothing. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what God is doing here. He doesn't know the mind of God. He doesn't say to the widow, I am learned in the things of God. I've studied the Scriptures and I can tell you what God is now doing with this death of your son. Instead, all he does is take the woman's burden. The passage tells us that she's holding the boy in her arms, which tells us he's probably a small boy, small enough for the widow to hold. And all he does is just take her burden. He doesn't try to explain his God. He doesn't try to rationalize his God. Elijah has the strength of faith to risk his God being misunderstood. That takes a strength of faith to risk your God being misunderstood. How did Elijah come to such a strength of faith as that? At the brook. When he fought within his own heart about his own misunderstandings of God. God had brought him to the brook. The ravens were feeding him, but yet there was no water. What are you doing, God? He fought against the misunderstandings, and he saw in his own heart, God is bigger than that. He's bigger than my misunderstandings. I don't need to come to God's defense. He's far bigger than that. You know, I think oftentimes those who are quickest to come to God's defense do so because they have a low view of the Father. Their view of the Father is so low that they think He needs our defending of Him. Now again, that's not just to condemn all of that, because some of that is led by God and some of that is holy and righteous. But sometimes I think that we are quick to try to alleviate misunderstandings about God, because deep in our heart, we're not really convinced that He's big enough and He's strong enough and He's powerful enough that He doesn't need our help explaining Him. Elijah's okay. He's okay with his God maybe being misunderstood. And remember where he is. He's in the middle of Baal country. What are the people going to think? Here's this widow. Everybody knows the widow has taken in a Yahweh prophet. What are they going to think? When this widow's woman's son dies, what's everybody in Zarephath going to think about Yahweh? Elijah is okay, leaving that up to God. This is a furnace, and God is continuing to refine His man. So we see his reaction. He doesn't explain. He doesn't defend. He says, "Give me your son." And he took him from her and carried him up into the upper chamber where he lodged and laid him on his own bed and cried to the Lord, "Oh Lord, my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I sojourn by killing her son?" Elijah doesn't have the answer. He cries out to God in desperation because he can't figure this out. But he's been here before. By the brook when he couldn't figure out the brook, by the empty flour jar when he couldn't figure out the empty flour jar, he's been here before and he knows. He, just like the widow, both of them, notice this, both of them credit God with the death of the boy. Amos 3 verse 6 tells us, will disaster strike a city and the Lord has not caused it? Both the widow and Elijah credit God with the death of the boy, but the difference is this. The widow credits God with the death of the boy, assuming that he had evil intentions. Elijah credits God with the death of the boy, assuming he had good intentions. And that's the root of the difference here. They both see God's hand at work. Neither one of them understand it. But the one who does not know God assumes his intentions are evil. Remember when we talked about the fear of the Lord? And remember how when we talked about those who know God as maker and creator, they're afraid of him because they don't know his character. They don't know his compassion, his goodness. And so because he's maker and creator, therefore he must be feared. We must be afraid of him. But those who know God as maker and creator, but also know his compassion and his character, not only do they know that he should be feared, but they know we are not to be afraid of him. So the widow is afraid of what God has done to her son. Elijah fears the Lord and is greatly confused, and he brings this confusion to God. Notice he doesn't express his doubt to the widow, but what does he do to God? He pours out his doubt. The order is very important. Elijah has doubt, and he keeps his mouth shut in front of people, and he pours his doubt out to God. So often we get the order of those two reversed on. When we struggle with doubt, the first thing we want to do is take it to people. I can't remember the number of times I've sat in counseling situations and somebody has expressed to me some sort of doubt that they're working through, some sort of confusion. And I'll say, well, obviously you're talking to me about this. You've talked to others about this. Have you talked to God about this? And always it's the same answer. Always. Yes. I have. But then as we sort of press it and go a little bit further, it becomes very apparent that they haven't. Or if they have, they've done so only superficially. And they've talked to me far more about their doubt than they have God. Or they've talked to their friends far more about their doubt than they have God. Elijah doesn't do that. He does the reverse. He keeps his words to himself in front of people, and he pours it out to God. God, what are you doing? Why would you curse her? Elijah's furnace, temperature's going up. Because what's happening now is Elijah is watching those whom he loves suffer. I think that Elijah has become affectionately attached to this family. He lives with them. Not romantically attached to the widow, but I think that he's emotionally attached to them now. He loves them. The boy, again, seems to be a small boy. Maybe he's been playing with them and has this relationship with the boy now. The widow, his heart has bonded with her heart, and he loves them. And now he's watching them suffer for the purposes of God. That is one of the hardest furnaces that we can be in. We think of the words of Job, though he slay me, I will still serve him. It's a way easier thing to say, though you slay me, I'll still trust you and serve you. It's a whole lot harder to say to God, though you slay my loved ones, I will still love you and serve you. That's a far more difficult test. To watch the ones who are close to you, who you love, to watch them suffer at the hand of God's working. God is refining Elijah. He is eliminating the last pieces of dross from the purity of his soul. And he's doing that by putting Elijah through this incredible furnace of watching this woman suffer and losing the boy of whom he certainly was affectionate toward as well. But he pours himself out. He cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I sojourn by killing her son?" Think of, in your notes here, 2 Samuel chapter 12. This is the story of David. Remember David with the whole adultery thing with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah and everything? Well, then after that, Bathsheba had conceived from that union, and the child was brought forth, and the boy was born into sickness and lived, was about a week or so. In the passage, I won't read through it, but the passage makes clear David is distraught in that way over nothing else in his life. I mean, his servants, the people around him, are afraid he's going to, it says, hurt himself, because he was so distraught over the suffering of a loved one. So the furnace for Elijah has been turned way up. God is strengthening His servant.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Truth That Transforms with pastor and Bible teacher Jason Wilkerson. Truth That Transforms is the daily teaching broadcast of Disciples Fellowship Church. We invite you to visit our website, where you will find more resources to help in your journey of discipleship. You can find us at www.disciplesfellowshipnc.com or connect with our Facebook page at Facebook/DisciplesFellowshipNC. Truth That Transforms exists to glorify Jesus Christ through the teaching of His sanctifying and disciple-making Word.